ChatGPT models achieve very competitive translation quality for high resource languages, but having limited capabilities for low resource languages.
Almost 350 LSPs are in the 2023 LSPI. Looking at all of those companies, they collectively grew around 10% in 2022 to 10.4 billion.
And hi, everyone. Welcome to Slater Pod. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
Slow week. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, a few things.
Nothing. So slow, AI, language, the hype's over. No, there's so much. I don't think we've ever published that many stories in a week. We're like up to a dozen, maybe 15 this week. Crazy. So we want to bring you a highly curated set of stories in this podcast. And we did have to leave a few things out, but good things happening. So first we want to talk about Mr. Beast, world's top YouTuber. Then ChatGPT, not a threat, says someone in the language services industry. Then we want to talk about Appen, quickly look into how well these large language models can translate according to Microsoft. You're going to talk a bit about healthcare interpreting in the US. And then we're going to look at the 10 fastest growing LSPs according to our ranking, which... Have we even spoken about the LSPI on the pod before? I don't recall.
I don't think so, no, because we published it last week, didn't we? And we didn't do a news pod last week.
We didn't do a news pod because we were so busy doing news. So anyways, so here you go. The irony of things. Yeah, sorry, listeners. So yeah, wait until the end and then you'll find out who the 10 fastest growing LSPs of 2022 were, and let's see if they can repeat that feat in 2023. Hey, so Clément Delong is complaining that too many people are talking about AI who have absolutely no idea what AI is and how it works.
I'm sure that's right.
I'm not sure. I think we would qualify. We would not qualify for this. We kind of understand language AI, don't we? We talk about it on a weekly basis. We write about it. Now, who is Clément Delong? Clément Delong is the CEO of Hugging Face, which is this kind of open source repository for all things natural language processing, and of course is now one of the hottest properties out there in the current language AI boom. Irony of ironies, Clément Delong means, Clément of language, I guess, if you translate it literally.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that his actual name? Or I thought maybe it was just his Twitter handle.
That's his actual name.
How convenient.
He was kind of quote tweeting somebody who said that he overheard at an AI conference that a company offered a researcher $4,000 to explain ChatGPT to their executives. And then ChatGPT is not that person's research area. So the guy went on and Googled what ChatGPT actually stands for. And, we all know that GPT, of course, stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. We all knew that, didn't we? All right, so before we go and talk more about large language models, let's talk about something, I guess, a little more fun. Mr. Beast's videos. Mr. Beast, if you're not familiar, has 136 million subscribers on YouTube. So, I don't know, that must be like 10% of all YouTube subscribers. And he is now getting into dubbing. He's getting into dubbing. I did not see that coming because we had him. We reported on this YouTube, having the audio button now, and you can select this, and them being in the beta phase and having like a select group of creators having access to that kind of multi-language function for a while. We've known that this has been going on for like a year. Now that the YouTube actually confirmed that they're rolling this out to thousands more users, they brought in Mr. Beast, who's like their top creator. And then he disclosed that he's no longer happy just buying dubbing. He now wants to get into providing dubbing to the creators. And the man is good at business. He owns like a chocolate brand now. He owns a burger brand. And now he also wants to go into dubbing.
It's a diverse portfolio, I have to say.
It's a diverse portfolio. But the interesting thing is he because we were speculating, right? We had this article where we kind of had the headline that it's a Netflix-sized opportunity if YouTube opens this up, the dubbing function to more creators. But now the top YouTube creator says, well, this is such a great business opportunity, I might as well do it myself. Instead of buying it, he's doing it himself. And he's already hiring. So he's hiring a CEO for a company that he called Creator Global. And in the job ad, it says, Creator Global currently provides dubbing services for creators around the world whose videos are distributed internationally. And they want to do all kinds of other services for these creators, but dubbing kind of is definitely a part of the thing that the company, services that the company is already providing. Incredible. I mean, I think this is one of the biggest opportunities of 2023. If you're even adjacent, or of course, if you're in media localization, this is a huge opportunity. They said they opened it up. They already saw 3,500 what they call multi-language videos uploaded in over 40 languages.
What do? You just sort of research who are the top, however many creators on YouTube, and then target them.
That's one approach. I think it's incredibly complicated to get to these people.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but I'm sure they're going to get a lot of inbound. So, you have to be well positioned. Like, for example, Unilingo, which was one of the earliest companies that started providing these types of services. There's probably a war for like good voice talent going on now, and maybe technology can help here as well. So super interesting. So if I was even adjacent to MediaLock, I'd be trying to get into this now. And because if YouTube opens this up to 100,000, the market just kind of 10x's overnight. So interesting. Moving to Australia, AI Media, publicly listed transcription captioning company. They published results. Can you just give us the highlights of the results? Like top line, bottom line?
This is the first half of their financial year, which I think ends in March, if I'm not mistaken. But they generated 20 million in first half revenue and EBITDA of 1 million.
By the way, US dollars, I think we always convert for your convenience. And then if you're a transcription, captioning, what have you company, and you're publicly listed, the first question you're going to get in an analyst call is, hey, what about ChatGPT? What about Whisper? Is that a threat for you? How do you see that? And the CEO, what's his first name? I think his surname is Abrahams. Tony Abrahams, right. So he said that he called the recent breakthrough of ChatGPT a quote, major awakening for our customers, adding that a lot of the people had asked him if ChatGPT posed a threat to AI media. And he said, my short answer is no, because it's not designed as a transcription engine. All right, but Whisper is. So, and we had Happy Scribe on the pod, and they're starting to use Whisper. So it's very much, at least competitive to what they're doing. And Abrahams also said that it's opening up new opportunities. He said there's a lot of new markets that have never tried automatic captioning are now going to do it. And so, it's that kind of position that a lot of these LSPs also are in, where like this hype has really opened up a potentially much broader market. And people are seeing what they can do with multilingual applications and with transcription, with translation. But it also, of course, does automate it a little bit further as well. So now everyone's trying to find out what type of services can be sold to people on top of that.
Where do we fit in on top of that?
Now, they also ask the CEO, Tony Abrahams, about if they're going to go into data for AI. And then he said, we don't want to, so the CEO of AI Media said, we don't want to or need to compete in the space of building AI models because there are tens of millions of dollars every year going into those investments across dozens of different companies. It's a competitive market, and the rising tide is literally floating all boats. All right, maybe not data for AI. I mean, just generally kind of building these foundational models as opposed to the workflow and kind of services on top of it. I guess that's what he meant.
I mean, they do have their proprietary tech, don't they? Of which, some of it will be reliant on AI. So I guess the question was, will you go more into that? But no. No,
despite their name, AI Media. I don't even know. Is that originally related?
It does not stand for AI. I can't remember what it is. I do remember. It's Access Innovation.
Good one, Esther. Wow.
Yeah, I know this from Yahoo. Yahoo Finance. And because I think their ticker says it at some point, Access Innovation. I could be mistaken.
Well, access services, right? And innovation, why not? Another company that is in data for AI, but that's not doing so well, is Appen. Covered many times on the pod before. Give us the highlights. They released their full year results and aren't really happy about it. The new CEO isn't.
Yeah, no, they're not happy about it. The CEO said the results from 2022 are far from satisfactory. He joined, I believe, in sort of December, maybe even January. So quite new to the job. So full year 2022 to December, Appen's revenues decreased about 13% to 388.5 US dollar millions. Still a large amount of revenues there, but obviously falling year on year. EBITDA also fell, underlying EBITDA. They had two numbers, one including Forex losses or Forex exchange impact and one not. But basically both fell. The one including Forex losses plummeted by about 86%. So EBITDA now around 11 million US dollars. They said, it's been a challenging time, challenging external operating and macro conditions they highlighted, and said that because of that, there were weaker digital advertising revenues and also a slowdown in spending from their customers. Particularly, so they've got these two main divisions, one being global services, which is about 75% of their revenues in 2022. In this segment, they said that their customers were continuing to face increased competition from new social media companies as well as privacy issues. So those were some of the reasons they gave for a decrease in spending. Also, the government segment, I don't know what kind of level of revenues they had derived previously, but it fell to somewhat like basically negligible, about 1.3 million in the year. So that was disappointing following the non-renewal of a contract that they previously held.
Can we just go back for a second? New social media companies. What could that be? TikTok?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I struggle to kind of join the dots sometimes when they're talking about what it is that their customers are involved in versus what AI Appen's role in that is. You know, when you're talking about kind of advertising, weaker digital advertising revenue. Okay, how does that pertain to data for AI services? So it's a bit of a stretch sometimes to sort of understand why.
Some of these things are really not related to language at all anymore, right? So it's more on the search side.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it. Like, it's not just language, as you've said. So yeah, disappointing year for them, really kind of across the board. Although H2 second half did see a bit of a pickup, so it grew 18% versus the first half. And then they had pockets of growth and positivity. They had, China did quite well in 2022. They had 80 new client wins there. They seem to be investing a bit in that country. And then also their second biggest customer grew 20% in 2022. So that also helped to contribute to a bit of a rebound in the second half. But the CEO said, now, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and the top priority is to establish greater operational rigor, among a few other things. So they're going to be, focusing on cost savings. They identified, I think it was 10 million US dollars in annualized savings. They also had, continuing on from 2022, they said they've had a soft start to 2023. So the outlook is not looking great either. They said the first half EBITDA, so for 2023, is also expected to be materially lower than the first half in 2022. They said the guidance on or outlook for EBITDA for the full year is now under review. They've also removed some targets that they had in place to 2026, and they are conducting a full strategy review, which will be unveiled in May. So kind of rethinking, reevaluating potentially the whole thing. Yeah.
The big question is, this company's hitting rock bottom, while what would, on a superficial level, would be considered the end market is going through the absolute biggest hype ever. I mean, I don't think there's ever been such a hype phase in AI. So if you're a company that's doing data for AI and you're hitting rock bottom when there's the biggest hype around AI. I don't just, it's interesting. Like conceptually, it's interesting. Sure, if you dig into the detail and you're like a stock market analyst and you spend half of your professional life looking at this, maybe you'll find the connection there. But to me, it just doesn't, I don't understand. Like there'd be a tooling company to equip all these AI systems with data. I mean, maybe it's just that they were such an incumbent and they had such great contracts with their existing clients that they didn't kind of expand into these other areas. But still, I don't really get it. It's interesting.
I think as well, there's, you said, new competition. I remember sort of 2-3 years ago, data for AI, a lot of LSPs were talking about going into it. There was a lot of non-LSPs, new startups in the space. There were people also focusing on trying to automate data for AI. So I think obviously that became a very, very competitive market with AI, with Appen still being the incumbent, as you said. But then also maybe we're at a point where, I think we were reading somewhere about these kind of companies becoming essentially a victim of their own success, where the AI systems are there. They're the ones who've been equipping and tooling and building up the capabilities of the AI systems for a decade or more. But now they're somewhat able, the AI systems, to learn on their own.
Well, hopefully they're not.
Hopefully not.
Bing, Sydney, I've always been okay. I've always been nice to you. I've always been nice to the AI. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting take. So you're saying that could be one school of thought, that basically they build them up and now all these big tech companies don't need them anymore. We also had Phil Hall on the podcast, remember, from LXT, competitive app. And actually, he had been with Appen prior to LXT for like a couple of decades. And I mean, he's saying there's just so much more competition now than there used to be. There, used to be a handful of companies. Now there's like 100 and 150 companies. So it's probably a function of like your core clients just not giving you as much work, you being busy with core clients, missing out on maybe kind of growth markets. But I mean, no investment advice. But if you look at their share price, I mean, if this new CEO is going to manage a turnaround, I mean, again, no investment advice, but this would be a nice entry point if you look at the stock chart.
Okay, I've also got a different theory. What was it? I mean, it's still a lot of money that they're generating here, 300+ million, on an annual basis. Okay, so they've had a bad set of numbers. Clearly, they need to rethink some things. But I think, yes, competition definitely increased. In terms of the sort of market cap and share price, I mean, maybe it is just what do they call it? Sort of writing.
They call it a re-rating?
Yeah, a re-rating, in the sense that, when Appen was one of the only people doing this, there was this big mystique around, well, what is it that you're doing? And there was a lot of interest. Maybe that at that point the market cap reflected that and the kind of hype. Whereas now, competition is there. People more understand what it is that they're doing, and other people are doing it too. So maybe there has been that re-rating.
Well, the re-rating is just also because their EBITDA just tanked. I mean, if your profits are down 80%, then, like whatever models these analysts and investors are building are just out the window. And
maybe it's both, a bit of both, I reckon. But yeah, I mean, market cap, I don't know if we said, but it was one point at around $4 billion, and now it's less than 200 million.
Situation for the new CEO. Let's ping him for the pod. Okay, so large language models. How well do they translate? Quite well. I just played around with ChatGPT again a couple of minutes before the pod, and great. I mean, good kind of DeepL level quality. That's also what Microsoft found when they did a really large research project or research paper on how well large language models translate. They said, our results show that GPT models achieve very competitive translation quality for high resource languages, but having limited capabilities for low resource languages. So they tested it on the usual Japanese English, Chinese English, German English, French, etc. That they also conducted some experiments with Icelandic and Hausa. So Hausa, Googled it, Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, parts of Burkina Faso, and Niger. I think it's just kind of this area where they speak Hausa, and not too much data for that. So maybe Appen can go and collect some data there to improve the Hausa quality for large language models. But look, I mean, I think we had a Tencent study. We had something from Google. Now we have something from Microsoft. Everyone's looking at what do these large language model mean for machine translation? How can we use it? How can we maybe, is there a way to fine tune them, etc.? Again, I'm not going to make the mistake that Clément Deloncle pointed out and going too deep into the nitty gritty here of how to train these things, but it's definitely a major issue that we need to keep covering on Slader. In terms of interpreting services, still very much humans in the loop or in the VRI or in the telephone loop here and
in the booth.
But for the one that we're going to talk about now, not so much in the booth, but probably at the other end of a receiver, still telephone or also some VRI. So AMN published results, AMN US healthcare conglomerate, service company, and they pointed out how well the language services division did.
Yeah, they did over in the US. So language services got a shout out by its parent company, AMN Healthcare, like you said. This is during the earning call that took place in mid-February. The COO said that team just continues to deliver very high quality services, very strong retention of clients, and in-account growth. So you might remember it's been, I think, 3 years now since AMN Healthcare acquired what was at the time Stratus Video, and now rebranded to AMN Language Services. They acquired Stratus for nearly $500 million, or $475 million back then. And as it happened, it was right before the pandemic. So AMN Healthcare added this VRI division right before COVID, which some would say was, impeccably timed, given that, everything went, as we know, I think everything went remote, which it was what Stratus Video was focusing on, the VRI space. And since then, so 3 years ago, AMN Language Services has been growing consistently. I think it's doubled, they said, since 2020 in terms of revenues. It's housed within, as is kind of often the case, they've been organized into one of the divisions of AMN Healthcare called Technology and Workforce Solutions, or TWS. That typically tends to be quite high margin businesses. But within TWS, language services was the primary driver of outperformance. So what did they generate? They generated, I think, 216 million. This is language services. In 2022, that's up 23% from 2021. So good growth during the year. And as I said, doubled since 2020. And Q4 was also strong, $58 million US. That was up 5%. So probably, slowed a bit in Q4 compared to the rest of 2022. AMN Healthcare overall, so massive company, their revenues were up 32% to more than $5.2 billion in 2022. But had a bit of a decline in Q4. And then also on the outlook, still expected to do really well, language services within AMN Healthcare. They said it's expected to grow in the high teens rate in 2023.
Good for them. So if I was looking for a company that grew fast and was already sizable and grew fast, I'd be in the language services industry, I'd be looking at US healthcare interpreting. And lo and behold, who would I find?
Well, yeah, Proprio Language Services, probably. If you were to combine all of those requirements, US healthcare, fast growth. Well, so as you know, we released the LSPI a little while ago. We've done some crunching of the numbers since. So we've got not quite 350, but almost 350 LSPs that are in the 2023 LSPI. Looking at all of those companies, they collectively grew around 10% in 2022 to 10.4 billion. I mean, that is obviously, I think, as we've highlighted, that's the headline rate, but obviously inclusive of things like acquisitions. So we would probably estimate growth, low to mid single digits in 2022. But, we're still seeing a largely robust set of results. We do see some LSPs had a difficult time either sort of staying flat on revenues versus 2021 or some number, I think around 14-15% reporting decline.
Those are the ones who actually were open enough to share this with us.
Well, exactly. And obviously the participation is optional, meaning, if you don't particularly want to share your numbers, maybe it disproportionately kind of favors companies who have grown in 2022. And it's tricky to account for that, obviously. But yeah, just to rattle through some of the fastest growing LSPs in 2022, there was Proprio, as you said, which is among the leader segment.
Yeah, leader being above $25 million in revenue, right? So, I mean, in terms of the companies of size, because we do have a couple of boutiques above, right? But Proprio, 190% in growth.
They nearly tripled, basically, in 2022. They're now at $96 million.
Congrats.
Yeah, almost hitting that 100 million mark. They did a few acquisitions during the year, firmly in their space. So, good, I suppose, good tailwinds within the sector, as well as some acquisitions completed during the year. So yeah, congrats to them. I suppose also, no others specifically within that sector, but we saw obviously good growth from Keyword Studios, probably topped the super agencies that we would classify a super agency. So they grew 32%. This is their entire business, not just the kind of localization piece. But, within that, I think localization was also a pretty strong driver, although we're kind of waiting for their full set of results to see exactly how the globalized segment did for Keywords. So they grew to more than $724 million. So pushing towards $750 million there. They were the fastest growing super agency. Challengers overall, I think, had a more difficult time than the rest. So when you look at them on a segment by segment basis, Challengers as a group grew slower or not as fast as everybody
Remind
else.
everybody, Challenger, what's the bracket there?
So Challengers would be between 8 million and 25. So that kind of mid-range, but among the challengers, there were some pretty strong performers. So you had Hero Talk, which grew, I think, 86% there. AVB Language Group, 75% growth. Language Network as well, 70% growth. So still some quite strong numbers among the top end in terms of growth, for sure. Yeah, and then also, I mean, other ones to call out as well. Yonkers, 76% growth there.
Silke doing a good job. Silke Schweiger from SDL took the CEO job there a couple of years ago. So it seems like it's working out.
Go check out the article. There's, I think, 12 or so LSPs that we highlighted. Got a nice little table displaying the growth and called out some others in terms of dollar terms growth, because we're talking here about obviously percentage terms of growth, but sometimes the picture looks a bit different when you're talking about how much they actually added in dollar terms over the year.
Already you also touched on the different segments, right? Super agencies, leaders, challengers, boutiques. So lots of info. Again, go and parse yourself. It's all there, freely available, not paywalled. Giving this all out for free. Cool. All right. That was a dense pod, and I think it's going to continue like that next week. So much happening, so much in the pipeline. Thanks for listening, and check in next week again.